In today's video, we have some very interesting developments on how the NHL may resume its season, as well as the NHL Draft possibly still taking place in June as originally scheduled. Plus, we have some other NHL rumors I want to take a look at concerning the Philadelphia Flyers and the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to discuss today. First off, let's kick off with a couple of rumors I want to take a look at from a variety of sources here, starting with the Philadelphia Flyers in an article from MusicSports discussing the future of Shayne Gostisbehere. Does he have a future with the Flyers, or will we end up seeing him traded when we get to the coming offseason, whenever that is going to be officially underway? Obviously, Gostisbehere is a player who a couple seasons ago put up over 60 points, was really emerging as one of the top young defensemen around the NHL. And was really looking to be a cornerstone of the Flyers' blue line for many years to come. Of course, 2 seasons back, he had a bit of a decline. In this past season, he declined further, but you could certainly say that a lot of that was due to injuries. He certainly did not have a healthy season, and when he was playing, he was not playing up to par at all. It was even probably fair to say a little worse than the year before. But depending on those injuries and how they were impacting him, maybe that was a big part of it. It's really difficult to say, but there were certainly plenty of times when he was kind of the odd man out and they were playing with other blue liners that were kind of filling in around him and kind of taking his spot. And there is reason to believe that his future in Philly very well could be in jeopardy. We might see him on the move. Now, he's got a very team-friendly contract, at least team-friendly in the sense that if he can play close to what he used to, then certainly there'd be many teams that would love to have him on their roster for that type of cap hit. He still has a number of years left, with a really reasonable cap hit. So from that perspective, there is, some attractiveness. He's 27 years old, so he still could have some solid prime years ahead of him if he can rebound here. But I guess the Flyers need to decide, do they really want to take the opportunity to move on from him and maybe free up some space, maybe bring back another piece that'll help the team? But they could be selling low on this player. Other teams are not going to want to pony up too much because of the recent struggles, and it very well could cause them to maybe not get a very great return. So, they've have other guys on that blue line that have been certainly stepping up. Primarily Ivan Provorov is clearly their leader on the blue line. You've got other guys that have been filled in nicely as well after being acquired, like Justin Braun and Matt Niskanen, but they're certainly not, as young. They're certainly playing well, but they don't have a lot of time left in their prime years. And for example, Justin Braun's a pending unrestricted free agent, so depending on what he wants for his next deal, it's hard to say if he returns. He's in his mid-30s as well, so certainly debatable how long of a future he has in Philadelphia. They've had other guys like Travis Sanheim look pretty good. Obviously, other guys like Philippe Myers, Robert Hagg. So it's certainly hard to say how they feel about Gostisbehere. It just seemed like there were times when their head coach, Alain Vigneault, kind of, I wasn't sure that he saw him as a big part of the team's immediate future. But I guess we will see. Do they sell low? Do they retain him? Hope he rebounds. And of course, if he plays better, do they hang on to him and hope that he can be a part of their future rather than trade him on to another team who's looking for some help on the blue line? There's always teams looking for help for a young, solid blue liner like Gostisbehere. He was linked for a long time to the Montreal Canadiens as they look to really shore up the left side of their blue line, and I wouldn't completely rule out a possibility of them exploring that, especially if Bergevin feels he can get a good return and have to pay a lower price tag due to the recent struggles. If they can get him for the right price, it might be worthwhile, but he does come with a lot of term and a lot of money if it doesn't work out and he can't get back to his old form. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Does Shayne Gostisbehere have a future with the Flyers, or is he likely going to be one of the top players traded when we finally hit this year's current NHL offseason? Now, as I mentioned, the other team I want to address some NHL trade rumors around and free agent rumors would be the Vegas Golden Knights. They have a lot of big question marks, and there's a recent article in The Athletic from Jesse Granger, who covers the Golden Knights, discussing what they might be looking like for their UFAs especially. Like, are they going to be able to bring back some of these players, predominantly goalie Robin Lehner, who was a big piece that they acquired before the trade deadline, and certainly a big question mark moving forward. Clearly with the kind of contract he's going to be commanding, he's going to want similar money. I would think that what Fleury's making, can they really afford to have 13, 14 million tied up in goaltending when they have all those other contracts on their roster? It's highly doubtful. I think the only way Robin Lehner stays is if they trade at Fleury, and I think that's quite unlikely. The amount of success that he's had with the team since the team started, and he was obviously their top pick in the expansion draft, face of the franchise. I just don't see that happening, at least not anytime soon. So Robin Lehner's days in Vegas likely end after the current season, regardless if it's able to be played out or whatever happens. Either way, when we have an offseason, I think Leonard's pretty much as good as gone. He's going to get his contract he's looking for from another franchise. Now, they also have some guys in the blue line like John Merrill, Derek Englund. They got some forwards in UFA status like Ryan Reeves, Thomas Nosek, and it's certainly debatable if all of those guys can come back. Clearly, they do need to watch their cap situation very carefully. They did sign a lot of big-time deals, with guys like Pacioretty and Mark Stone. They get Fleury on the back end. They have a lot of guys making a lot of money, and they need to round out their roster with some value players, which a lot of these guys have been, but they can only be value players for so long. The better they play, eventually they're going to want some bigger money. There was many feel like Ryan Reeves likely does return, that they try to get him signed to, somewhat similar contract to what he's earning now, maybe a little bit less. Reeves is still very effective, a unique kind of player. He will be high in demand if he does hit free agency. So I do see the possibility that he might be able to get more money elsewhere, to be honest, but he might want to remain in Vegas, and if he does, he might work out something to stay. In terms of Thomas Nosek, he's been a decent bottom six player for them, but with a guy like Nikolai Waugh been coming up and playing a lot of NHL games over the last year or so, maybe he could take a role from Nosek and do so at a cheaper price and save them a little bit of money in their space. Nosek's only made $1 million this past year, but I can see where he, might earn himself a little bit more of a raise, whereas Waugh's signed to a cheaper contract. They might only save a few $100,000, but when you're tight up against the cap, every little bit certainly helps and goes a long way to make that space be put to the best use possible. And on the back end, maybe it's time to move on from veterans like Derek Englund and John Merrill. Clearly, they're not really the most efficient guys on their blue line any longer. I think Merrill's a guy, to me, should be as good as gone. He's really never been a terrific blue liner in Vegas anyway. And with younger players like Whitecloud and Haig kind of emerging, especially Whitecloud's been signed to a 2-year extension, I think they can use their younger defensemen to make some space for them on that blue line and save a little bit of money that way as well. And even back to the forward group for a second, they're going to want a guy like Cody Glass to be a full-timer next year, and they have to create some space for him. So it is unlikely that all of their forward guys do return, and they could create some space for them. And they also have some other top guys like Peyton Krebs coming along the way too. They're not going to want to have too many spots tied up on that roster on too many big-time, longer-term deals, so they can squeeze in some of their younger players around them to kind of fill out the roster. So in my opinion, in Vegas's case, I think a fair bit of their UFAs do walk or retire or leave town in some capacity, but I think the main one who's likely to stay would be Reeves, and the rest to me are as good as gone as they use their younger players in their system to round things out. Now, as I mentioned as well, there was some fairly big news yesterday regarding the NHL Draft and how the season might resume. I know TSN insiders like Bob McKenzie, Pierre LeBrun were all talking about this yesterday. Of course, there's been some NHL meetings with GMs and things taking place, and some information came from those meetings. Now, there is talk that the NHL Draft, the 2020 Draft, might still be held in June like it was originally scheduled. Of course, it's not going to be in Montreal at the arena like it was planned for, like we've seen in the past what the traditional draft looks like, but it still will be held virtually. The main reason around this, obviously, is they'd like to create some kind of a buzz for hockey fans, give hockey fans something to look forward to, and if they're not able to play until later into the summer, they just don't want to go that long without there being some kind of event, obviously, that can kind of create a buzz and get people talking about hockey, get the interest back, and have something leading into potential playoffs to kind of get everybody back on the hockey train here before that takes place. Now, the only problem is they'd have a lot of questions that would need to have answers before they could have a draft. Clearly, without the season being either canceled or resumed and finished, you don't have a draft order. You haven't done a draft lottery. How is all that going to work? There's big question marks. Would they decide to go based on standings? Would they still have a lottery? Personally, I think they would still do a lottery. I think there's too many teams that would be against that. And obviously the league can't just make decisions on their own. They're going to have, enough teams buy into the idea to have a majority vote. And obviously the players and their union have a say as well. So obviously there's some things there that have to be ironed out. There's a lot of draft picks that were traded as conditional picks. How are those going to work? Some of them didn't have everything sorted out yet. It wasn't clear if the pick would be given up this year or next, or what round it would be, because there's so many conditions that are outstanding, and with all the games being played, there's not a clear-cut answer to that. So they'd have to rule on those situations as well. And the other big question mark with the draft is, would we see trades, or would they have to not allow trades, or how is that going to work? Because we always see a lot of big-time off-season deals take place at the draft, but then if they have playoffs right after, how is that going to work? Because you're kind of in the off season when you normally have the draft, but you really wouldn't be if that's the case. It's debatable how that's going to work, and would it be as fun and exciting if we knew for sure there would be no trades or how that was going to work. But they would certainly have a lot of things to address that still have it in June. At the same time, though, if you think about it, let's say that they were able to complete the season and then take a month off to do the draft in the offseason free agency. That really doesn't give these young players that are getting drafted a lot of time to know what teams are going to. Do they start a training camp with their junior clubs and then leave to go to an NHL training camp? It really could be very chaotic and be very much a big time mess if they did the draft later. But like I said, doing it early, there's just so many questions as well, and it's just hard to say. Of course, it's not the NHL's not the only league that's obviously heavily impacted here. Pretty much every other pro version of hockey and even the junior ranks for hockey, they're all question marks right now on will next season start on time, how it's all going to work, because there's obviously teams spread out in all different jurisdictions, all different provinces across Canada and the US, and there's different situations going on with this COVID-19 virus, and they're all going to kind of be recovering at different rates, at different time frames, so it's certainly questionable how all that's going to go. So I guess we will see. It'd be fun as a hockey fan to know that the draft is still going to be in June. We don't have to wait so long, but how's it going to work would be the big question mark, and we're going to have to wait a while for some answers before we know how that's going to play out. Now, as far as playoffs go, there's also been some talk about neutral sites and where they're going to be. Obviously, some cities are just not in a position to host right now. It's not safe. So there was a lot of talk about neutral sites being considered. According to some insiders, that appears to be a no-go, and I've seen that from a variety of sources, including Friedman. Pierre LeBrun mentioned it as well, I believe. So clearly that looks like it's off the table now. What they're now leaning towards and what idea being discussed is having one location per division where all the teams would be hosted and have games played in one area where they would deem to be like the safest place to do so. There was talk maybe the Central Division would be Minnesota, perhaps the Metro would be Carolina, maybe the Pacific would be Edmonton. As far as the Atlantic goes, there was no team mentioned, but if you look around all the teams and how like the virus is impacting those particular cities, it's really not quite clear exactly how that could go. It might be a little early to tell. So we'll have to wait and see on that, because all those areas are certainly impacted to some degree right at the present time. But basically they would name one location per division. They intend to bring all the teams there, have them host it in safe locations, and maybe play 3 to 4 games a day, like a morning, noon, evening, or something to that effect. Have it going on periodically so that no matter what time zone you're in, you're getting hockey all day long. And then from there, get a bunch of regular season games played, and then move forward to a playoffs. Obviously, the playoffs will be some kind of adjusted format, probably expanded format, but to what exactly, not quite clear. I know many NHL guys seem to say maybe 20 teams, having an extra couple teams kind of battle in. So it's certainly debatable how that's all going to work, but that is the latest coming out of the meetings from the NHL on how things might resume and with the draft and how everything might eventually play out throughout the summertime. So, of course, as always, we'll know your thoughts and opinions and everything we discussed here today, especially on the NHL and how it could resume. Do you see that possibly working out? And what questions would you have about how it's going to work if they were able to move forward? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Again, I want to take a moment to thank our channel membership holders. Your support for the channel is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.